From Thom Hartmann's Daily Take Substack. Welcome to MAGAstan. Trump's GOP is building an American Taliban of racism and authoritarianism. Loyalty oaths, banned history, forced obedience. The right isn't hiding anymore. They're telling us exactly what kind of dictatorship they want. Published August 20th, 2025. The following is a song inspired by this article.
Orwell's warning, straight from the page. They're twisting the future, rewriting the age. History's burning, truth's under ban. Welcome, my friends, to MAGAstan. Loyalty oaths, the past erased. Whitewashed glory in freedom's place. You can feel the walls closing in, but the fight for tomorrow must begin. Welcome to MAGAstan, where the flag's just a mask for the master plan. They call it patriot, they call it free, but it's chains and silence for you and me. Welcome to MAGAstan, where the strong arm rules and the truth is banned. They're not hiding, it's out in the open wide. But we won't let democracy die. Teachers tested, history denied, museums purged, the truth pushed aside. Black voices silenced, women dismissed. Every freedom struck off the list. Statues rise for the traitors' cause, while justice falls to their crooked laws. But a whisper is building to a roar. We won't bow, we won't ignore. Welcome to MAGAstan, where the flag's just a mask for the master plan. They call it patriot, they call it free, but it's chains and silence for you and me. Welcome to MAGAstan, where the strong arm rules and the truth is banned. They're not hiding, it's out in the open wide. But together we'll turn the tide. Rise up, stand tall, democracy for all. Rise up, stand tall, we won't let this nation fall. Welcome to MAGAstan, where the flag's just a mask for the master plan. They call it patriot, they call it free, but it's chains and silence for you and me. Welcome to MAGAstan, but we've seen this play and we'll break their hand. They're not hiding, it's out in the open wide. But together we'll turn the tide.
In his novel, 1984, George Orwell warned, quote, "Those who control the present control the past, and those who control the past control the future," end quote. Today, Trump and the GOP have weaponized that prophecy, twisting it into the foundation of their crusade to make America white again. What they are building is not a political movement, but a parallel nation, a MAGAstan, where loyalty oaths replace truth, history is scrubbed clean of slavery and racism, and authoritarian obedience is demanded in the name of patriotism. This is America's homegrown Taliban, and they're no longer pretending to hide their intentions. When the Oklahoma Department of Education rolled out its new, quote, America First, end quote, MAGA certification exam for teachers, designed with the help of a right-wing propaganda outlet, it wasn't about improving education. It was about making sure that any teacher who dares to acknowledge the realities of race, gender, or American history is shut out of the profession. Applicants from California or New York must now take a test that appears to demand perfect answers on questions about civics, chromosomes, religion, and so-called gender ideology. It's not an exam, it's a political loyalty test, and it fits neatly into the larger pattern we are seeing in Republican politics today. They aren't hiding their racism or misogyny anymore. They're reveling in it. That reality was underscored by Donald Trump's latest tantrum against the Smithsonian and other museums. On his Nazi-infested social media platform, Trump complained that our museums are, quote, out of control, end quote, because they talk about, quote, how bad slavery was, end quote, racism, and the struggles of the downtrodden. He whined that there is, quote, nothing about success, nothing about brightness, nothing about the future, end quote. What he really means is that America should stop teaching about slavery, Jim Crow, redlining, and ongoing systemic racism, instead return to a whitewashed myth of national greatness that erases black, indigenous, and other marginalized voices. His words are a plain translation of the GOP's broader war on what they call, quote, woke, end quote. Being, quote, anti-woke, end quote, is just a thinly veiled way of saying, quote, we're okay with racism and misogyny, end quote. And Trump is the perfect avatar for this reinvention of the Confederacy, as I detail in my newest book, The Last American President, A Broken Man, a Corrupt Party, and a World on the Brink. Trump's and his GOP's pro-racism, neo-fascist purges go far beyond education and museums. They've also gone after the federal workforce with a vengeance. They've canceled the government's annual employee survey, gutted DEI programs across every agency, and are mass firing federal workers, particularly in agencies that employ large numbers of black women. The so-called Department of Government Efficiency, run by a Nazi-saluting white South African immigrant, put more than 250,000 jobs on the chopping block, devastated communities where civil service has long been the pathway to the middle class. Black Americans, particularly black women, have disproportionately relied on these jobs for stability and upward mobility. Taking them away isn't about saving taxpayer money. It's a targeted attack designed to roll back decades of progress. At the same time, groups aligned with Trump are publishing watch lists of federal workers they call, quote, subservies, end quote, lists overwhelmingly filled with women and people of color. Those people are now being hounded, relocated, and forced out altogether. Senior women and black leaders in the military are being fired or pushed into retirement. Vice Admiral Shoshana Chatfield, NATO's only woman in its military committee, was removed from her post. Army Lieutenant General Talita Crossland, who had led military health care, was forced to resign after 32 years of service. These purges aren't political, not professional. They're designed to restore the military to a largely all-white, all-male leadership structure. And at the same time, Trump and his enablers are working to rename bases after Confederate generals and restore monuments dedicated to traitors who fought against democracy to preserve slavery. And now Trump is claiming, against the statistics, that crime in Washington, D.C. is, quote, out of control, end quote. This is Nixon's Southern strategy. Blame crime on black people while turning the country into a police state on steroids. Racism is the thread that ties all of this together. When 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act in Shelby County versus Holder, Republicans wasted no time enacting voter suppression laws that disproportionately disenfranchised black voters. When Republicans on the court blessed partisan gerrymandering in Rucho versus Common Cause, Republican-controlled states immediately redo maps to diminish the power of black communities. This is about keeping power in the hands of white conservatives, no matter the cost of democracy. And the cruelty isn't limited to our own citizens. The Trump administration has begun deporting Afghan translators who risked their lives working alongside American troops even as they continue to apply for legal protection through special immigrant visa programs. ICE agents recently detained one such interpreter, someone who has helped U.S. soldiers survive the war, because the new GOP priority is to get as many brown people out of the country as possible. This is not patriotism. It's ethnic cleansing by bureaucracy. I used to believe that maybe 20% of white Americans were openly racist. That was based on my experience growing up and on the way racism was often hidden behind polite code. But looking at today's voting patterns, at the cheering crowds for Trump's open bigotry, it seems more like 55 to 60%. When the majority of white voters willingly support a party that strips voting rights from black citizens, erases slavery from classrooms and museums, fires black leaders from government, and deports brown allies, that's not a fringe problem. That's a national crisis. This kind of, quote, othering, end quote, of racial and gender minorities is a classic hallmark of fascism. It's what we saw in Germany in the 1930s and what Viktor Orban and Vladimir Putin are doing in Hungary and Russia today. You dehumanize groups of people, define them as enemies of the state, and then strip away their rights until they no longer have the power to resist. Trump and the GOP are running this playbook right out in the open, and far too many in the media are still treating, quote, anti-woke, end quote, rhetoric as a culture war issue, instead of what it really is, a naked declaration of racism, misogyny, and authoritarian intent. Democrats and people of good conscience cannot let this language go unchallenged. Every time Republicans sneer about, quote, woke, end quote, it should be called what it is. They're defending racism and misogyny. They're trying to drag us back into a world where straight white men hold all the power and everyone else is erased. This is not just an ideological disagreement. It's an attack on the very idea of equality and democracy. Woke people must stop playing defense and start organizing. We need mass mobilizations, marches, protests, and direct action to show that Americans will not tolerate a return to white supremacy dressed up as patriotism. We need to pressure Democrats to go on offense, to stop using mealy-mouthed language and start telling the truth. The GOP is running on racism, period. And we need to demand that the media stop laundering Republican talking points and call out this agenda for what it is, a fascist project to make racism great again. The stakes are nothing less than the future of American democracy. If we fail to rise to this challenge, they won't just win the next election. They'll win the power to define who counts as an American, whose stories matter, and who has a right to belong. This is the GOP's version of MAGAstan, a land where truth is outlawed, history is erased, dissent is punished, and democracy is reduced to a hollow slogan. It's not conservatism. It's not patriotism. It's the same naked pursuit of power through racism, misogyny, and authoritarian rule that we've seen in one country after another throughout history. And here's the brutal truth. They're telling us exactly who they are and exactly what kind of dictatorship they want. The only question left is whether the rest of us will stand by in silence while America is dragged into its darkest chapter, or whether we'll rise up, speak out, and refuse to let our country become an authoritarian nightmare that Trump and the GOP are building in plain sight.